Here's another group of poems. I believe this is number 12. Still a lot more to go, but 10 at a time. Congratulations on your 105th, Eleanor. The commercial banquet hall is empty, although the cheerful sign persists, wishing well to the recently deceased centenarian who just barely missed the party planned in her honor. A maintenance worker folds and stacks the furniture, pulls down the streamers, and steps on the balloons. Soon the vacant room will be festooned for another occasion, but today only the forfeited deposit remains as testament to Eleanor's longevity. Her closest relatives would have pushed her wheelchair from one uncomprehending table to the next, so that old acquaintances long ago dismissed from her barely flickering but still wonder-filled brain could shout at her their practiced desperate platitudes. But now her family huddles around her grave, saddened by the service but also casting each other looks of anxious gratitude. Critique of Pure Reason. Digging my heels into the cold, wet strand, unable to focus on the vast expanse of ocean, outlying islands and horizon, light inflected on the shattering undulation, the mind-boggling flux of a simple summer day, seagulls crisscrossing shadows like blades, a wind around our ankles picking up the spray and fine-blown mites and sand. Even what is still impenetrable. The smudge of distant trees on the arm of the cove, the sun that blinds itself in the lens of sky above, eyesight glimmering like a prayer of water in the cup of a hand. Disambiguation. The ordinary well of feeling, like cold water poured from an earthen jug into a simple bowl, clear and bright, with one narrow window from which slants the only light, to illuminate the gloom, to wash my hands for prayer, seems to have corroded into a mere gradients. This interior has become a medium of stifled fear, the penumbra here a bluish tinge, so that the darkness itself darkens within me, and the borrowed words of my ineffectual supplication taste like stale communion wafers on a dry tongue. I am schooled to say them, to repeat myself the requisite number of times, but despite the discipline of this despair, the pale shadow of light that falls across the tabletop dust is still as insubstantial as an afterthought. Cutting down the trees. Excuse me. Traffic is diverted by a man in an orange hard hat and a yellow vest. He brandishes a sign that says slow on one side and stop on the other. Another man swings a chainsaw around, cutting down the ancient trees along the road so that they topple into the empty lot where soon construction will begin on a hotel. It is winter and the trees, a row of maples, have no leaves, as if that somehow matters, as if it makes it merciful and right. The cloud cover is so thick and so complete that the trees and all the shadowless surfaces between are like dull clay men shouldering up the street. Each tree, when it finally falls, makes a sound almost like thunder, but closer and not so loud. A fallen tree is a deadly thing, and all the workers and the spectators stand back as each tree cascades into the lot with a sinewy crack, so that it can be dissected into smaller logs and loaded by a front shovel excavator into a waiting dump truck and carted to the incinerator. Dr. Seuss and LSD. All creative misdirection, a little sing-song brain-damaged muttering, is all the unifying field or force demands of me. Federal Street. Walking along the cemetery wall, Olive, our lab, straining at her leash. The persistent sleet is dreary all around, but my eyes are level with the higher ground, so that I can sometimes see the grass and weathered stones, as if I myself were standing in a grave, or wandering in an urban catacomb, lit not by smoking torches but by freezing rain. The passers-by like faint images of young men or women whose hearts are new to pain, and others impalpable as shadows grown old with mediocre sorrow, until Olive stops to sniff a crack in the cold concrete, the rock and mortar that stays the past from spilling into the street, and I wonder if she can smell the mildew on the bones, or the fragrant compost of loam and carbon dust that was sometimes full of laughter, sometimes lust. Hard to miss you. Hard to admit that the place where you are not actually exists, that this mirage of pain through which I am pushing does not end, that constantly trying to remember you won't change a thing, that the shadow you cast, standing on your toes and trying to grasp the flower on the pantry shelf, that the depression that you made in the whirlpool sheets on our bed, and the fragrance that you left behind, cinnamon and sulfur, sleep and sweat, are all gone now too, that in this imagined world a crisis of faith is the only crisis that is, that it is hard to miss you. Hocus pocus. This is my body, middle-aged, out of shape, like a bare tread tire losing air, my shrinking penis about to disappear in a cloud of graying pubic hair. No point going to a doctor for my ulcerative colitis. There is nothing worthy to save. Youthful will never again add glory to my name. Eliminating gluten or dairy will not redeem me from the sullen indignity of a wife who no longer finds me attractive. Not even this poem can rescue me from the death march of life. January thaw. I found a postcard in my mailbox. It wasn't addressed to me. It read, "I'm sorry, I forgot to signal before turning in front of your car, but my mind was in Afghanistan where my son is a Marine. I haven't heard a word from him in more than 3 long weeks, and I am as frightened can be. Nights of Pythias. The blade of a rusted knife pressed against the loose ligament strings rings from the homemade guitar the tonic, dominant, and subdominant seventh, recreating a music invented in the Gilded Decade years before, so that W.C. Handy can transpose the score of 40 years of futile work, desperate migration, and the bitter consolations into the Memphis Blues, a song that moans just like a sinner on revival day. He practiced and he practiced until he could play the sound that wrapped a spell around his heart, turning misery, perseverance, and art into a melancholic strain, a haunting refrain, a sweet old sorrow song, the Memphis Blues.